somehow, some way, God's master plan factors error and evil into the equation. Let me be very clear. He is not the author of evil. He does not authorize evil. But listen, within his sovereign plan, he factors in evil. He factors in error into such a degree that he receives even greater glory because of it. And he does that somehow within his divine and perfect will. And so in the morning, the day that he's headed towards execution, instead he gets exaltation, and all of that because Esther made a mistake and failed the day before. New Hope, God is in the details. He's even involved in our mistakes and our failures. And this is such good news. It's good news if you've ever sinned like I have. It's good news if you've ever made mistakes. It's good news if you've ever chickened out and you can't quite get the words out. It's good news if you've failed. And here is the key. The key is this: mistakes on our part do not alter the plan on God's part. This is such good news. One of the keys in this story that I believe has emerged within my heart as I've looked at this story is to recognize that Esther, in her humanity, she made a mistake, you could call it. She failed to exercise faith, but it was that mistake that was wrapped in the providential plan of God that he worked out in the next 24 hours in a way that brought him even greater glory. And so here she is, finally ready with courage to speak. You just got to ask the question, why would she be courageous to speak now? Well, Esther undoubtedly knew what happened to Mordecai that day. Remember who Mordecai is to her. How are they related? First cousins, okay? But remember the age gap. Mordecai has raised her as a daughter. So this is a man who's very close, very dear, a father figure in her life. And she undoubtedly knew that day what had happened to Mordecai, that he got led around on a parade in a circus by Haman, who was dragging the horse saying, "This is the man the king delights to honor. This is the man the king delights to honor." She undoubtedly knew the story of what had happened to Mordecai that day. So she comes into the meal, my friend, and she is emboldened with courage. Isn't God good to give us courage for our faith? Here she is ready to issue her request. And the request, here's why she has been nervous. Her life is at stake, and her family's life is at stake. And the big reveal in verse 4 does not indicate yet that she is Jewish, but it does indicate and expose that she is in grave danger. Take a look at verse 4 with me. For we, that would be her people, we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss of the king. New Hope, let me just pause there and reflect upon what she's saying. Her life is at risk. Her family is at risk. She's exposing the reality that there's somebody in the Persian Empire that is actually out to assassinate the queen. And the big reveal is that there's this plot thickening in the story in which the queen of Persia, who's married to the king, is in danger of losing her life along with all of her family members. That is the big reveal. She has not yet revealed she's Jewish, but the reveal is, "King, help me. Save my life, save my family." And that leads to verse 5, which is the jaw drop. The jaw drop. The king is absolutely mortified by this news. Can you imagine the scene? Enter the room with me. Enter the scene. The queen has just revealed that somebody's out to kill her and her family. I imagine the king sets down the drink and stands from the table. I imagine Esther with tears streaming down her face, begging and pleading for help. And I imagine Haman, if he had been slouching, all of a sudden he sits up. Because things are beginning to come together. All of the senses are at work, and the king demands to know who in the world would dare to do this. Take a look at verse 5. King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he? Who has dared to do this?" New Hope, right in your Bible, climax. This is the turning point of the whole book right here. 10 chapters long. This is the turning point. Because for 6 years of marriage to the king, everybody's assumed she's Persian. She looks it, she walks it, she talks it, but they don't know what they're about to find out. And the penny is about to drop. And the king wants to know, who would dare try to kill my wife? Who would dare? Where is he? And here it is, my friends, verse 6, the penny drops. Esther said, a foe and enemy, this wicked Haman. He's right there. And then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. You think so? Now, I can't prove this, but I think at this moment, Haman probably, reached down and held up, he probably held up a black sign. Uh-oh. Little State of the Union fun there. New Hope, listen. He knows he's in trouble. And this is that turning point, the crisis moment, when all of a sudden the penny has dropped and they realize that Esther is connected to the Jewish people. And not only is she connected to the Jewish people, but she is directly related to the same man that Haman the Horrible has been trying to kill for an entire year. The penny has dropped. New Hope, I want to go to an action step here. Action step is this. Just pause the story for a moment. Lay biblical footings. I'm talking about the mental footings, the solid foundation within our heart. And here it is. Somehow, some way, God's master plan factors error and evil into the equation. Let me be very clear. He is not the author of evil. He does not authorize evil. But listen, within his sovereign plan, he factors in evil. He factors in error into such a degree that he receives even greater glory because of it. And he does that somehow within his divine and perfect will. Perhaps in the business world, this illustration would help. In the business world, businesses, big businesses especially, will factor in shrinkage. Have you ever heard of that term? They factor in shrinkage, which means that in the big model of their success plan, their revenue, and their goods, their resources, what they do is they factor in that a percentage of all of their profits will be lost due to theft, damage, or errors in the supply chain. Take Amazon, for instance. Every single year, they factor between 1% and 2% of all of their resources will be lost due to shrinkage. And New Hope, that is within the concept of success. Success wraps in loss, error. And I would contend to you the same thing, that in the blueprint of God's plan for the universe and in God's blueprint for our lives, he wraps in, he factors in both human error and suffering and evil. He wraps it in, and somehow, some way, he works all things together for the good of those who love him. This is why Esther is one long narrative of Romans 8:28, because God is working in the midst of error and evil, not the cause of it, but the redeemer of it. And this is such good news for folks like you and me, because in the midst of our lives, you have error, you have mistakes. We also have evil that is done to us. And as we go through life, this is why the footings, the biblical footings, are so critical, that as we go through life, that when we commit error, we are not overly overcome by regret. And when evil is done to us, we are not overcome by despair, because we recognize that neither regret nor despair takes into account that God is working all things for his glory. So those deep footings that I'm talking about would look like this. It would look like this, that we have a deep footing of silent sovereignty, meaning God has the authority and the power to do anything he wants. And the second footing is happy providence, that somehow God is uniquely working, arranging, moving, and directing the affairs of human history, and he does so for his glory and our good. That is the biblical footings that we're talking about. New Hope, Esther chapter 7 confronts us with this reality that our God is working with a hidden hand of providence in our lives. Do you believe it? Do you rest in that? That is comfort for the troubled soul.